Granpa Long Beard. In days gone by, an unusual sound came forth from the forest glade. A handsome knight who was passing by stood stunned for a moment, then suddenly saw in front of him a charming sight. He hid behind a thicket and looked on intently. Under the great oak and around a cackling fire danced and frolicked a host of gleeful children. They were, in fact, waiting for Granpa Long Beard. Who was he? Whence did he come? No one knew, but the children loved him and he loved them too. Crick-crack, crickety-crack, sang the wooden shoes of Granpa Long Beard. He appeared, back slightly bent under a large bag, a parrot perched on his shoulder, and his soft snow-white beard flowing down to his toes. "Good morning, my sweet little cherubs," he gently greeted them, and the parrot repeated after him. "Good morning, Granpa. What are you going to tell us today?" asked the children in a musical voice. "Ah, I've important news for you," he replied, distributing presents and cookies of nuts and honey from his bag. "The two kingdoms bordering this forest are making war on each other," continued the old man. "But alas, the good king, with a daughter as beautiful as the spring day, will always be defeated." "Why?" interrupted the parrot, who, too, was listening with interest. "Just because his army cannot cross the deep winding river. For there is no bridge over it," replied his master. "What'll happen to the beautiful princess, then?" asked a wee girl, betraying great anxiety. "The wicked king will take her to his land and marry her off to his son," said the old man. "Is there no way out to save the good king?" enquired a smart little lad. "There is, yet there is not. For the twig of the cedar tree, not very far from you and me, shall form a bridge placed on water, the army then can cross thereafter, but whosoever lets this truth out, shall turn to stone before he can shout." The young knight, who was from the land of the good king, had heard enough. He found the cedar tree without any difficulty and, breaking a twig, made his way to the palace. "Your Majesty, at nightfall I will build a bridge across the river." "Please do not ask me anything further," said the young man. "If you accomplish what you say," replied the king, "you shall be aptly rewarded." As soon as the knight placed the twig on the water, it expanded and formed a bridge across the river. The next day, the king's army crossed over to the other side. They took the enemy by surprise and defeated them. But within a few days, the enemy regained strength and won a victory. The young man went to the great oak and saw the children playing around the fire. He waited, concealed by thick shrub. Crick-crack, crickety-crack. Granpa Long Beard made his appearance. "What interesting tidings do you bring us today?" asked the children excitedly. "Yes, I do have some news for you. I'll tell you. But mind you, never repeat it aloud once you've heard it. The good king did manage to build a bridge with the help of the knight who heard my words the other day. But the enemy has again gained an advantage. Yet there is a huge fig tree, not very far from you and me. The powdered figs, when thrown on ice, shall drive away the bad guys, but whosoever lets this truth out, shall turn to stone before he can shout." The knight found the fig tree without any trouble. He gathered some fruit and powdered them under a rock. Then, going to the king, he said, "My lord, do not be disheartened. Challenge the enemy tomorrow. Instruct the army to execute the attack along with the flow of the wind. Put me in the first rank and the day shall be ours." The king was happy that there was such a brave man in his realm. He consented to the knight's proposal and promised him a greater reward if he succeeded in his task. There was a fierce battle the following day. The young man spread the powdered figs in the air. Black clouds formed as though by magic and blinded the enemy without even bursting into a shower. Many fought bravely but fell to the sword of the knight and his men. Others fled. The wicked king was forced to surrender. The king, overjoyed at the young man's achievements, embraced him and said, "What other worthy reward do you deserve but the hand of my daughter, your daring and noble?" Awaiting the day fixed for the marriage, the young man often took long walks with the princess in the sprawling palace gardens. One day, she asked him, "Tell me, dear, how could you construct the bridge across the river in a single night, and what is that magical substance that drove away the enemy?" The knight, who had by now forgotten the ominous warning, told the princess all about the strange happenings in the forest. Alas, no sooner had he reached the end of the story than he turned into a statue of stone. The delicate princess gave a frightful cry, and one of the king's nobles, who happened to be nearby, rushed to her side. What has befallen our gallant knight? He asked the princess. Recovering from her shock, the princess related in every detail what she had just gathered. Scarcely had she ended her story than she, too, was transformed into stone. The small kingdom knew no greater sorrow. There, in the palace gardens, amidst bright-hued flowers, dancing fountains, and sweet chirping of birds, stood the lifeless statues of the beautiful princess and the handsome knight. The noble who had heard the story from the princess could not get a wink of sleep. He was overcome with the desire to find the enchanting place in the mysterious Granpa Long-Long-Beard. On the morrow, he went to the forest and found the great oak. There, in the clearing, the fire was cackling merrily and the children were playing around it. Crick, crack, crickety crack, Granpa Long-Long-Beard made his appearance wearing his singing shoes of wood. What news do you have for us, Grandpa? The children eagerly asked. Of course, I do have some news for you, he replied. The other day one of the king's officers happened to ride by this place when he overheard me. He built a bridge across the river and beat the enemy by means of the powdered figs and brought victory to this land. The grateful king offered him his daughter's hand in marriage. But alas, the young man revealed the secret to the princess and forthwith turned into stone. The princess, too, repeated it and met the same fate. The merry kingdom is now plunged in the deepest sorrow. Oh dear, dear, a sensitive little girl cried out, drops of tears trickling down her rosy cheeks. But, continued the old man, a spring runs over the lea, not very far from you and me. When sprinkled with water from this stream, the statues will again like a human dream. But whosoever lets this truth out, shall turn to stone before he can shout. The noble located the brook without much difficulty and brought a cupful of its sparkling water. He then hastened to the palace gardens. Scarcely had he sprinkled a few drops on the two statues, lo and behold, there stood before him the princess and the knight in flesh and blood. The kingdom wore a festive look and was agog with excitement as the good news spread everywhere. The happy monarch asked the noble how he could perform such a miracle and restore his daughter to life. But the good man refused to reveal the secret that might lead to terrible consequences. The king, however, insisted and was bent upon knowing it. The noble's persistent refusal angered him. If you do not reveal the mystery behind this miracle, you shall be banished forever from my land, said the king to the noble. Your Majesty, please grant me a week's time, begged he. So be it, replied the king. But mind you, on the 7th day you should present yourself before me. The next day, early in the morning, the noble wended his way to the charming spot, by way of taking a chance, if he could hear some clue to save himself. The children had just gathered around the fire and were relishing plum cakes their grandpa had brought out of his large bag. The parrot was entertaining them all with his nonsense rhymes and abracadabras. I've something interesting to tell you today, said the old man, but you must not by any means repeat it. Last time one of the king's men hidden behind that bush heard my words. He found the spring and with its magical water restored the princess and the knight back to life. But the king now wants to know how he could perform such a miraculous feat. What can he do but let the secret out? Well, he shall forthwith be changed into stone. Please do tell us, Grandpa Long-Long-Beard, is there no way to prevent this mishap? Asked his wee audience all together. There is, replied the old man, but you must not talk about it. There is a tall cherry tree, not very far from you and me. Whoever eats its big round fruit, ripe and red, can speak the truth with no fear dread. But should he let his own secret out, he shall turn to stone before he can shout. The noble at once rushed to the cherry tree and ate one of its red fruits. He then hurried to the palace and recounted to an astonished king the story behind the strange happenings. As he never said how he immuned himself against the ill effect, nothing happened to him. The marriage of the brave knight and beautiful princess was performed with much gaiety. By the way, the noble assumed the role of the bridegroom's guardian, as the knight had lost his own father. And all of them lived happily thereafter. Thanks for listening. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel. See you with another story.